Hello everyone and welcome back to another Babbling Irons video with myself and Sloth. And today, more news emerging around a potential move forwards for a striker, and that man is Gyokeres. I don't know if I'm butchering a name, but the Coventry City striker that is pretty on the hot list for most Premier League clubs around kind of West Ham's level at the moment. Everton, Leeds also looking at him. But it's recently come out that we are maybe making a few more advances. And this came out today that we've kind of taken steps in the last few hours to sign the player, with our Europa League qualification being a key factor in maybe signing him over other clubs. One team that has been linked with him recently is Sporting, and it looks like they were trying to progress the deal pretty quickly, but now it looks like maybe we're forced to play our hand on it a little bit earlier than maybe we wanted to. As a player, let's break him down for those that aren't really familiar with Gyokeres, or Gyokeres, however you want to say it. Talk to me, because we've already seen with Scamacca, it didn't work out particularly well in his first season so far. What is Gyokeres going to do when he comes in? Does he fit the mold? Firstly, does he fit the mold of a Moyes type striker? And secondly, do you think he can make the jump up from the Championship to the Premier League?
I think he'll make the jump up with ease. He's 6'4", 6'2". I'm thinking of Scamacca. He's 6'2", but he's also built, so he's a strong old unit. But he's fairly quick. I was just saying to you that he's got that physicality where he doesn't really look like he should be as quick as he is.
Yeah.
It's almost like Harry Kane, watching Harry Kane move, where he doesn't look like he should be able to beat a man, or he doesn't look like he is beating a man, but he will get a yard on them because he's got that burst of pace. And overall, I think he could score goals at any level, in my opinion, particularly with the way we play, but also our threat from set pieces, the quality we rely on there. And he shows a really strong skill set overall. For West Ham fans who may not have seen him play, I know a lot of us watch the Championship, but he does really remind me of Dean Ashton, just the sort of physicality. He's not quite shown the outstanding skill set that Ashton had, in the ability to be able to do overhead kicks and whip that volley in. But it's his movement, his style overall, that I think is a good comparison to him.
Okay, that's really interesting, because obviously most people absolutely love Dean Ashton and the type of player he was. So if he's anything like that, then obviously he'd be amazing and loved by the fans. But in terms of breaking down who he actually is, in terms of the numbers behind it, obviously we're all about data on this channel, all about backing up with statistics. He was actually on our list that Mike put together on our Babbling Twitter page of potential signings for this summer. Been a recurring theme, actually, with players cropping up as targets on that list, and Gyokeres is another one. So let's take a look at the scout report card that we have for him. He's actually now 25, so the age is now kind of outdated, as he was just turned 25 this month. But looking at the positives and negatives, let's start with the positives. Obviously, like you mentioned, physically strong, can hold up the play really well, something that he's just started to do this season, really. It was something that he was maybe criticised for a bit, but he's definitely developed that this season at Coventry. Highly mobile as well. Maybe doesn't look like he would be, but he is. And, with those progressive carries, exactly what Moyes would want in a striker. And he's also very effective, within the build-up and possessional phase, which something Antonio has been good at. And it's something also been criticised for, because he hasn't been able to do it on a consistent basis. And again, another positive is his finishing. We'll need to be clinical, because we're a team that plays in moments. Moyes is a manager that likes moments, so he'll want his striker to be clinical. It's probably why he signed someone like Danny Ings in January, to try and get that clinical edge. But looking at that kind of scout report card, I'll get it back up in a second, though, Sloth. What kind of excites you most about Gyokeres as a player, and would you be on board with this potential signing this summer?
I mean, I think it'd be a fantastic signing. You're looking at a player who scored 24 goals in the Championship, but also got 12 assists. So, I mean, even if you think about that in terms of, 36 goal involvements, if someone did that in the Premier League, just across a season, you'd be thinking they've had a fairly good season.
Yeah.
And in terms of, what he'll bring to the side if he were to join, it is that sort of overall play that we've seen from Antonio, but with a bit more technical ability. And, you know, I have been critical of Antonio, and it's not to say that I don't like him, but it's those are the details at the top level that separate someone who scores 10 goals a season from someone who scores 20 goals a season. And when I look at
potential to
Gyokeres,
do that in the Premier League, be like a 15 to 20 goal season striker.
I think definitely with the way that we play, you know, he is 6'2". His aerial game's funny because he doesn't score most of his goals with his head. However, he is, you know, with a bit of work, particularly with someone like Kevin Nolan, if he can really have time on the training pitch to iron that out, I don't see any reason why he can't get that sort of those sort of numbers in the Premier League. It is obviously an adjustment and it's a big ask, but you look at someone like Mitrovic and what he does for Fulham, I think there's a lot there. There's not quite that same element of dark arts that that Mitrovic is well renowned for. But it's that same sort of physicality, a bit more finishing ability and pace.
In terms of how he would play in Moyes' system, obviously some strikers benefit from having another striker present, maybe a number 10 running off him, something maybe Scamacca's lacked at West Ham, that kind of number 8, advanced 8 or 10 playing off them, or even a second striker. Gyokeres is probably, if he was to come in, he's going to be that isolated striker that we know we're going to set up with, and it's unlikely, unless we bring in a kind of a Lingard-esque number 10, that he's going to be having someone really playing necessarily off of him as a maybe a second striker. So does he have the kind of fundamental abilities to operate as a solo striker? Because I know at Coventry, he's also played a lot with a 2. So would he be suited to be playing by himself?
I think he definitely does. It's that the key thing when you look at someone who plays up top on their own, I think it's the pace, but it's also the ability to turn a man. And he does have that by the bucket load, the ability to just shrug someone off the ball, gain a yard on them and create space for themselves. I think as well, when you look at the 12 assists that I mentioned, you know, he is also happy to link up and just create space for himself. So if potentially we had 2 wingers like Barnes and Bowen next season, the pace and the space that they create, I think that's massive for someone who's shown quite a lot of a poacher's instinct, the ability to find a yard in the area and turn and hit things quickly as well.
Interesting. And kind of just to look at the other side of him, obviously he does still have negatives as well, which we've highlighted on the scout report. So we've mentioned again aerial ability being one of them, but like you mentioned, can be something that's improved on over time and we can work with, because you know, you look at Antonio, a lot of his goals have actually been headed goals in the penalty box. So he would need to maybe improve that part of his game. And also defensive contribution. It's something that every striker really has to do in a Moyes system. Antonio's criticised for not doing it as much as he possibly should. And that is that defensive contribution. A very, very tough task to do that in this West Ham side, just because of how isolated you can become, and B, you do really have to work hard up there, not just with the ball, but without the ball. So is there anything that kind of puts you off this move before we get onto like the price tag? Like, is there anything in terms of his overall game that you think maybe wouldn't be the best suited to this David Moyes and West Ham team?
Not really. I think in terms of his pace, he could be a little bit quicker, but you know, again, if you've got wingers who have that, it counteracts it. It really does help a forward, because they know they have someone who can make them that yard of space extra in the area, or they can just rely on with a through ball. And you know, we mentioned the 24 goals, the 12 assists, which is a huge thing, but in terms of that sort of the weakness of defensive contribution, I do kind of find myself thinking, with a striker, there's only so much that you want them to do defensively. Obviously, pressing is a different thing, but I don't class that as defensive contribution. And I don't think it generally falls under that in terms of stats. You know, if someone goes, and scores 20 goals and they get 10 assists in a season, no one's going to go, yeah, but they could have tracked back a bit more.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I think he would really suit us. It's one of those where I would like, as a caveat, for any striker we sign, someone else to come in as well, because I think having competition, but also a goal scorer as your competition, someone like Boulaye, who we've been linked with a lot, but is very similar in terms of his strength, his ability to find scraps and feed off them, but also link up with others. It's having two players like that. It creates more of an urgency than, say, someone like Danny Ings, who when he comes on is a totally different type of striker to what we've got. So I think that would be my one sort of concern, is that we just don't really recruit correctly, and also don't really have that competition for him to thrive off.
Sure. Well, it's being kind of quoted at figures between kind of 20 to 25 million as maybe the fee that would maybe take him away from Coventry. Obviously, him and Hamer are probably their two outstanding talents from last season. Gyokeres is going into his final year of his contract, so he's got one more year left at Coventry. So with that kind of in mind, how much would you be willing to pay for Gyokeres? And would you see him as, I know you mentioned bringing in someone else, but do you see him as a potential starter going into next season if he was to sign?
Yeah, I think it's kind of one of those questions that I think as a West Ham fan I go, because it's whether I think he's better than Antonio or not is irrelevant. It's whether it's what Moyes thinks, and I don't think he's going to start straight off the bat unless Antonio goes. But I'd happily start him. I think going into next season, if you want to, if you want to go into the new season, a player who scored goals for fun in the Championship, if you say to them, go out and prove a point, I know you missed out on the playoffs, but go out and prove a point that you're good enough to be in this league and you deserve to be it. I think that's a huge thing for a player. And I mean, 20 million I think that's a good price. People were talking about Jordan Rhodes, people who scored goals for fun in the Championship, even Ivan Toney. We were talking about a £20 million price tag for him, and people were saying, pay it. He stepped up to the Championship, from the Championship, and again, scored goals for fun. So I think it's worth paying. If we were talking about 30, maybe a little bit hesitant, but I think that's a fair price. With 12 months left, you could maybe argue that you wait until the end of the window, maybe see if he forces a move. But just not really. I don't really like that approach. So for me, I think that's value for money.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Championship it's always kind of an underrated place to find talent. I mean, you look at our starting front three that played in the Europa Conference League final: Benrahma, Antonio, Bowen, all came from the Championship. So you have to kind of think of it that way. Gyokeres absolutely has the talent. He just hasn't proven it yet in the Premier League. He didn't do particularly well in the early stage of his career, but he's really, like you mentioned, really flourished at Coventry, especially last season. I mean, those stats are incredible, regardless of whether it's the Championship or Premier League. So I think it would be a good deal if we can get him for 20 million. I think that's a very good price to pay. And I would like to see what happens, with the current strikers we have, whether we then let Ings go for, say, 10, 15 million. Because again, that immediately reduces the Gyokeres price, really, because you're getting rid of Ings that isn't necessarily playing much anyway. And then you've still got Antonio and Scamacca potentially to hang around with. So then you have three pretty decent striking options, and all a little bit different. So let us know what you guys think in the comments. Would you be on board with signing Gyokeres this summer? Would you try and get it done early, despite the price tag maybe being a little bit higher? Or are you holding out for maybe a bigger European name from across the globe? Let us know in the comments what you think. Leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, as always. And Sloth, one thing left to say.
Come on, you Irons.